State Circle is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
This week on State Circle, lawmakers grapple with the emotional end-of-life debate.
I know what I will likely die of. I want the ability to choose a peaceful death.
2 Maryland natives honored with powerful new statues.
And that's the reason it's so important that we have these 2 statues here, because they weren't able to be in that room because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment hadn't been enacted.
And are there holes in Maryland's hate crime law?
We understand that the letter of the law was not aligned properly with the intent of the legislatures.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Good evening. The big story around State Circle this week is the highly personal debate over end-of-life legislation. Last year, the bill that some call death with dignity and others call assisted suicide failed by a single vote, as Nancy Yamada reports.
It would allow them to die peacefully in their sleep with loved ones by their bedside.
Reverend Alexa Frazier, an ordained minister from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Silver Spring, stood among a group of religious leaders who gathered in Annapolis to voice their support for Maryland's End-of-Life Option Act. She watched her father suffer and ultimately take his own life.
He tried pills, then he tried cutting his wrists, but you can't do that when you're shaking with Parkinson's. Finally, he used a gun.
The End-of-Life Option Act would allow anyone who's terminally ill with less than 6 months to live the option of getting a doctor's prescription for medication that would allow them to end their own lives. Last year, the Maryland Senate fell 1 vote short from passing a version of the bill approved by the House of Delegates. 9 states have approved medical aid in dying or death with dignity laws, but there is still contentious debate between physicians, ethicists, and religious leaders who believe only a higher power should determine when life ends.
It's important that we, as a government, don't limit people's abilities to make choices based on their faith. And that's why the bill is here in part, because we're giving everybody the ability to make their own choice consistent with their own faith.
On the other side are opponents who say the bill would threaten the safety and well-being of vulnerable citizens like the elderly and people with developmental disabilities. They say coercion by caretakers is a real concern.
We've always had a lot of concern from the disability community about this legislation because they know that their lives are much more expensive, especially when you look at it for medical care and the insurers, everything else like that.
Senator Michael Huff also worries about misdiagnoses.
No one can diagnose if you're within 6 months of death. They really don't know.
And the implications on the medical community.
We've had good testimony from doctors at Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, about their concerns about taking doctors, people are healers, and turning them into killers, because that's what this is it removes. In Maryland, we don't allow physicians to assist with suicide, and that's really what this does. It gets rid of the ban on physician-assisted suicide.
Despite those arguments, one of the bill's sponsors, Senator Jeff Waldstreicher, insists.
Like most other states, the bill that we have in front of us has an enormous amount of controls built into the legislation to ensure that no one can take advantage of it without first going through a number of difficult processes. That includes a determination that the person will die within the next 6 months, and that determination is made by 2 separate independent doctors. There are other cautions within the bill as well.
Reverend Frazier, who is still haunted by her dad's suicide, says she's even more committed to the fight now that she is battling a rare and aggressive cancer.
But now I know what I will likely die of. I want the ability to choose a peaceful death with my family around me rather than one filled with pain or drowning in my body fluids.
I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
House and Senate committees this week were both asked to consider strengthening the state's hate crimes law. Our Sue Copen reports it's the result of a successful murder prosecution where the related hate crime charge was dismissed.
I beseech the state of Maryland to correct this so that no other mother has to feel the daily pain that I feel.
Dawn Collins is the mother of Lieutenant Richard Collins III. The newly commissioned Army officer and Bowie State graduating senior was murdered nearly 3 years ago.
We raised a good man. We raised a man that any mother would be proud to have.
It was at this University of Maryland bus stop in the early hours of May 20th, 2017, that Collins was killed, stabbed by a White College Park student while waiting with friends for a ride. Collins' attacker was convicted of first-degree murder in December, but a hate crime charge was tossed out by the judge, who said prosecutors failed to prove that hate was the sole reason behind the fatal attack. Now, state lawmakers are being asked to change the law.
The judge believed that the statute was narrow and should be construed to mean that only if the state can prove that hate was the only factor in the commission of the crime could the state prove that a hate crime was committed.
Prince George's County State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy says they want to make certain that anyone motivated by hate in the commission of a crime is held accountable.
Senate Bill 606 is a bill that would clarify and make it very clear and certain that if an individual commits a crime in whole or in part motivated by hatred for someone in a protected class, that the hate crime statute would apply to them.
Richard Collins' father says they are cautiously optimistic that lawmakers will approve the proposed change.
We understand that the letter of the law was not aligned properly with the intent of the legislature, so we're hoping that this whole process that we're going through today will begin the road to correct that.
Former Prince George's County State's Attorney and retired federal judge Alex Williams told the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee that the current law can be confusing even for judges.
They're not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the prosecutors are able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the real reason and the only reason for the action is simply based on hate.
Deputy Prince George's County State's Attorney Jonathan Church was part of the team that prosecuted the former University of Maryland student who killed Collins.
There was evidence that was produced with regards to social media and the role it played in the defendant's actions, and I think changing the statute would allow for a broader scope, a broader interpretation of the statute to make it a little bit more reasonable to consider other evidence other than explicit words or anything like that.
For Rick Collins, the change in the law can't come fast enough.
The law failed our son, and it failed our family, and we need to work together to change this law and to make sure that no family has to feel the pain ever again that we've experienced.
Sue Copen for State Circle.
State auditors have discovered a questionable use of tax dollars. A whistleblower complaint said the state's opioid operational command center planned a $750,000 purchase of a golf course for an agriculture-based treatment program.
The money could be better spent on naloxone to make sure that people that are overdosed can be revived. They could be spent on public health programs for local health departments that have been doing a lot of outreach into communities to make sure that we bring people back from addiction. They can be spent on beds to making sure that people that have addiction can have resources and access to services and programs to help them quit and help them break their addiction.
The golf course purchase was not completed, findings of the audit being referred to the Attorney General's office for review. The legislature is considering a bill aimed at giving more working Marylanders time to grieve without losing their paychecks. Lawmakers heard testimony on a bill to require companies that have over 15 employees to offer paid leave for the death of an immediate family member, also in the case of a lost pet.
So we found it interesting that you could take time to take care of a loved one who's sick, or even for your own sickness. But should that sickness come to an end, there's no protection for that.
The bill would expand on current law. The Maryland Flexible Leave Act allows employees to use earned paid leave to care for immediate family members who are ill. Two new additions to the centuries-old Maryland State House do not make a sound, but they say a lot, as Charles Robinson reports.
Though the night is dark and I am far from home.
God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way.
These powerful, beautiful, and incredibly moving works of art will serve as a reminder of just how far we have come. And may they also inspire us to focus on the hard work that still lies ahead.
We will likely never know the names of the many enslaved individuals who helped build Maryland, but the names of two native Marylanders who were born here enslaved, but who emancipated themselves, are known to all Americans.
It was one of the most anticipated reveals in Annapolis. Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass statues will now reside in the old House chamber of the State House.
It's not such an easy task to put 500-pound bronze statues into a 250-year-old building, so there was a great deal of structural work that had to take place before it could be done.
So as you can see, I'm much taller than Harriet Tubman. But what I want you to think about, this is a woman who started a revolution.
And when they see how small in stature she was, and to do what she did, to come back into the state at least 13 times to help her family members, various friends in the community to escape. I mean, someone that small and tiny accomplished all of that.
Our charge at the archives was to imagine what it might have felt like and looked like for Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass to be present in the room where the abolition of slavery in Maryland finally occurred on November 1st, 1864.
And it came time for Marylanders to ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment in that room, and guess what? They turned them down. They turned them down. And that's the reason it's so important that we have these two statues here, because they weren't able to be in that room because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment hadn't been enacted.
The statues are a reminder that our laws aren't always right or just, but there's always room for improvement. I now invite the descendants and relatives of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who are sitting right here, to join me in opening the doors to the chamber.
The permanent display is open to the public 7 days a week. In Annapolis, I'm Charles Robinson for State Circle.
And to see the full video of the two statues in the making, you can visit www.mpt.org/statecircle. Now, the Hogan administration this week presented its vision for moving the state to carbon-free electricity. The bill would include, in the definition of clean power, new carbon capture systems, small nuclear units, while reducing incentives to burn trash in incinerators.
Last year was a 34-12 vote on the floor as to whether you should include waste energy in last year's Clean Energy Jobs Act. So I think that the Senate has spoken.
It is certainly fair to say that in today's ultra-competitive energy and waste markets, this credit that has been in place since 2011 plays a very important role in the economics of the facility.
Other bills pending in the legislature would lead to the closing of the state's remaining coal-burning power plants. Baltimore area officials are asking lawmakers for $500 million a year to help grow a regional transit network. The county executives say the 5-year plan would improve transit options for residents while cutting pollution.
Since the
transportation tax increase occurred in 2013, which the Greater Baltimore Committee did support. The Department of Legislative Services has shown that there's only been a 2% increase in spending in the MTA. Contrast that to the State Highway Administration that's seen a 77% increase since the since the fiscal year 2013. So this would help us get some projects in the pipeline.
We look forward to increased regional transportation collaboration on our mutual transit needs, and we want to ensure a safer, more reliable, more accessible transit system for all Maryland residents.
Supporters say the regional transit options in Central Maryland do not provide adequate service. And we're back with a political roundtable right after this.
Can you tell us what you know?
Turning back now to the race for the White House.
The State Board of Elections voted Thursday to set up a new election. It must be a very emotional day.
The world changed in the blink of an eye.
Children are at the heart of this story.
Drop your phone and just be in the moment.
You guys ready?
It's a thrill to see images of a new world for the first time.
I want to look back and say, I learned something. That is where transformation happens.
I see people cry on this show, and I'm like, what y'all doing, man?
Out of the water came this giant thing.
That's incredible.
I feel it in my bones.
It's so totally amazing.
They hear that song and they're like, that's my story.
I have chills.
All of the joys, all of the sorrows.
This is where it comes from.
The rest is history.
Our job is the truth.
I'm a journalist.
My destiny is to rule this country.
I will not run away.
Yes, Mom.
It's very exciting.
Lord, I'm getting tired of being so lonely. I've got the fire inside that burns more than it lights.
Sir, are you a gentleman? How dare he?
I'm a strong woman and I've got my own. I'm in control. I need somebody to
I refuse to be tamed. Kiss me. It's terribly hot, isn't it? No?
Please be mine again.
No.
For the political roundtable this week, MPT's Charles Robinson joined by Luke Broadwater of the Baltimore Sun. Luke, thanks for being with us. The big story you broke, the Healthy Holly scandal with former Baltimore Mayor, former State Senator Catherine Pugh. Some new information this week came out of the sentencing filings. What did we learn?
Well, we learned a couple things. The prosecutors are asking for about 5 years in prison for former Mayor Catherine Pugh. They said basically from day one she had begun a very complex corruption scheme involving the sale of these Healthy Holly children's books. They alleged in the most recent court filing that Pugh double and triple sold the books over and over again, netting close to $900,000 for herself. She never delivered many of the books. The books were never asked for from the school system. And basically, this was a very disturbing and sad chapter that, as you pointed out, we started reporting on last March, so it's been almost a year.
Look, these sentencing guidelines, I think they want about a year and a day. And I thought that was like, you really want to only just give a year and a day because there's some additional charges that may come down after this. Is that correct?
Yes, it could be. Pew's defense team is asking for that year. They view her as an almost 70-year-old woman, not a threat to public safety, and think she should get a lighter punishment. Prosecutors disagree. They see this as a fraud that betrayed public trust and may have, in fact, stolen the last mayoral election. They said that the money did play a role in influencing that election, which Catherine Pugh won quite narrowly over Sheila Dixon.
And the tentacles are kind of spreading with people who were associated with her. I know the comptroller in the city of Baltimore, Joan Pratt. Joan Pratt was kind of caught up in it because she and Pugh had a consignment shop, and there were some monies that were exchanged between them.
Yes, that's right. So Mayor Pugh and Controller Pratt, who's still the controller in Maryland, co-own...
In Baltimore, let's
I'm
make
sorry.
sure. In Baltimore, we have to make sure.
In Baltimore, not Peter Franchot.
Right.
Co-own a thrift shop. It's called Two Chic Boutique in Pigtown. And the allegation from federal prosecutors is that about $20,000 was laundered through that shop. Joan Pratt said she had no idea about this, that it was money she thought came from Pew. She did not know it was illegal money. But she's going to be under a lot of scrutiny now that this new revelation is out.
And no allegations against Controller Pratt at this point. But Luke, there are other things still hanging out there. I mean, to what extent has the former mayor been cooperating, and might there be charges brought against other individuals who were writing the checks here?
Well, the mayor has pleaded guilty, so she has admitted to 4 federal crimes. To the best of our knowledge, she has not turned on anyone else because there are no charges against anyone else to date. But that's not to say that more couldn't come out. I asked the U.S. attorney somewhat recently whether he considered the people involved with Pew to be victims or co-conspirators. And he said at the time he thought some of them were victims, that they had bought these books honestly and that their money had in fact been stolen from them. But there could be, there's the potential for further investigation, the U.S. attorney said. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, I was about to interrupt you to say that we should talk about education a little bit, because the House delegates today passed a big-ticket school construction bill.
$2.2 billion, is that correct?
That's right.
And I think what's interesting is, I think everybody knew this bill was coming down the pike. I don't think they thought it was that enormous, but it is big, and it's going to provide for a lot of school construction all across the state. It's not just one jurisdiction. There are a lot of schools in this state who their schools have been crumbling literally around them. We saw that with the rollout of We Need the Money. Luke, help the audience understand why this money and where it's coming from, because this is a part of the lockbox, is it not?
That's right. So this is a bipartisan bill. The governor, Larry Hogan, a Republican, supports the bill. So do House Speaker Adrian Jones and Senate President Bill Ferguson. The idea here is that all across the state there's crumbling schools, crumbling infrastructure, and they really need a boost to start building new ones or repairing them. So this $2.2 billion, a lot of it does go to the 7 biggest jurisdictions, Baltimore City, Montgomery County, Baltimore County, but there is about $230 million for the smaller jurisdictions as well to help them with their needs. So there was some concern from some of the smaller jurisdictions that they weren't getting enough money from this casino lockbox. But Delegate McIntosh, the lead sponsor on the bill, said that basically the whole state is going to benefit from this.
Now these bonds are going to be repaid with future casino revenues. So everybody out there has to keep patronizing the casinos, right?
Yes. Yeah. Your gambling goes to fixing up the schools. So keep that in mind.
Boy, I don't know why I don't like that term, but I guess that's the way it works.
Slots for tots. I mean, it was called at one point. The other big education spending push is the Kirwan plan. Very complicated, very expensive, and the big push for that starts on Monday, correct?
Yeah, we're going to have a huge rally here in Annapolis on Monday, and then after there's a joint hearing. Look, this is a bill that everybody's anticipating. talk about some of the nuances, if you will. The biggest one is, how do you pay for it, is it not?
That's right. So this, as much agreement as there is on school construction, there's going to be a fight over the Kirwan Commission bill. This bill calls for about $4 billion more a year spending on the operation of public schools. There are all sorts of recommendations in this bill, dozens and dozens, everything from increasing teacher pay to expanding pre-kindergarten to more vocational training in schools. I mean, it's a 199-page bill.
This is a catch-all. We want to get everything in here
Right.
we can. But here's the bigger problem. How do you pay for it?
Right.
And that's not really clear yet.
Well,
have you seen anything? Have you seen anything? Because I haven't seen
I've read
anything.
the whole bill. There's no funding mechanism in the bill, so there's no suggestion in the bill of how to pay for it. That said, the lawmakers are working on a wide array of other bills they say would pay for it. They're talking about sports betting. Mm-hmm. They're talking about taxing digital downloads. They're talking about increasing the tax on tobacco. The one thing they have rolled out are across-the-board increases to the sales, property, or income taxes. So you won't see those go up. But you could see some of these other things that we've been talking about, maybe closing some tax loopholes for corporations, things like that.
All right, you can read Luke Broadwater's reporting, BaltimoreSun.com. Luke and Charles, have a good weekend.
Thanks a lot.
Happy Valentine's Day.
That is our program for this week. Tune in every week at this time as we bring the State House to your house. Remember, you can connect with State Circle online, streaming videos at video.mpt.tv. Now, for all of us here at MPT, I'm Jeff Salkin. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.
TV Worth Watching is supported by the members of MPT and by...
What's your next move? Extend beyond your current position or make inroads into a new field through UMBC's professional master's programs and certificates in public policy, organizational psychology, entrepreneurship, and more. Our programs are founded on research principles and led by recognized faculty from government and private enterprise. Our community is committed to seeing our graduates drive positive change and translate policy into action. Claim your future at UMBC.
71 acres in downtown Baltimore devoted